I first got involved with filmmaking when I was an undergraduate. My major was social psychology, but movies had always interested me, mainly films from Europe. Some friends of mine and I bought 60mm cameras and began making short films starring people we knew. One of our super productions was called The Cheat. The idea was to take parts of scenes from soap operas and even comic books and jumble them around to show how absurd relationships can be. The theme was cheating. Who is cheating on whom? After the film was finished, the lead actor and the lead actress got married, which was no surprise since they had been in a relationship for a while. Then something unexpected happened. They went on their honeymoon, and the actress met another man. To make a long story short, they ran off together, leaving the recent bridegroom not only without his longtime girlfriend, but also facing a divorce. Life imitates art, my fellow young filmmakers said at the time. I wonder what they'd say now. What happened to these people? Flash forward to many, many years later, I had switched my major from psychology to motion picture production and entertainment law, and I was beginning to have some success at an indie film production company. One early Saturday morning, I received a phone call from a guy I knew in the business. He was on a business visit from Europe, and I had already seen him a couple of times, so to get a call from him even that early did not surprise me all that much, except he was sobbing. It was as if he could not complete a sentence through all of his tears. Within minutes, I was in my car, speeding toward his hotel. What could have happened? In what condition would I find him? For the next 45 minutes, I sat across from him and watched him sob. That's all I could do. I had seldom seen a person that distraught. Finally, he started to repeat the name of his wife over and over. Laura, Laura. She had not accompanied him on this particular business trip. My first thought was that something had happened to her, that she was seriously ill or even dead. If it had been later in the day, I would have dashed out and bought him some cognac. That's what people do in movies and even in real life, but I did not want to leave my friend. Eventually the sobs abated, and my friend began to speak. He had slept with a woman who worked for the U.S. office of a company he was doing business with. And he had told his wife. She had been more than furious. She was going to leave him. That was that. It was over between them. My friend, whom we'll call Franz, had been unfaithful. He had cheated. But instead of keeping it to himself and living in fear from that point on in his life that his wife would find out eventually, he volunteered to her that he had been unfaithful. What should Franz have done? How should Laura have reacted? Today's episode is going to be divided into two parts. Part 1 will be about what sort of person cheats, how can you spot a potential cheater, and what makes a person cheat. Part 2 will be about the psychological consequences of cheating, plus a few related tidbits. Richard A. Friedman is a professor of clinical psychiatry at Weill Cornell Medical College. In 2015, he wrote an article in the New York Times in which he expressed some views which turned out to be quite controversial, to say the least. I'm going to begin my discussion of what sort of person cheats by mentioning a few of Professor Friedman's observations. Americans, he wrote, disapprove of marital infidelity. 91% of them find it morally wrong, more than the number that reject polygamy, human cloning, or suicide, according to a 2013 Gallup poll. Yet, the number of Americans who actually cheat on their partners is rather substantial. Over the past 2 decades, the rate of infidelity has been fairly constant at around 21% for married men and between 10 and 15% for married women, according to the General Social Survey at the University of Chicago's independent research organization, Norc, N-O-R-C. We have long known that men have a genetic evolutionary impulse to cheat because that increases the odds of having more of their offspring in the world. But now there is intriguing new research showing that some women, too, are biologically inclined to wander, although not for clear evolutionary benefits in the greater scheme of things. Women who carry certain variants of the vasopressin receptor gene are much more likely to engage in extra-pair bonding, one of the many scientific euphemisms for sexual infidelity, which in and of itself is a euphemism for cheating. Brendan P. Zeich, a psychologist at the University of Queensland, Australia, has tried to determine whether some people are just more inclined toward infidelity, that is, biologically inclined toward cheating. In a study of nearly 7,400 Finnish twins and their siblings who had all been in a relationship for at least 1 year, Dr. Zeich looked at the link between promiscuity, so-called, and specific variants of vasopressin and oxytocin receptor genes. Vasopressin is a hormone that has powerful effects on social behaviors such as trust, empathy, and sexual bonding in humans and also in other animals. He found that 9.8% of men and 6.4% of women reported that they had had 2 or more sexual partners in the previous year. In other words, they had, quote-unquote, cheated. His study, published in Evolution and Human Behavior, a significant journal, found a significant association between 5 different variants of the vasopressin gene and infidelity, cheating, in women. Significant association. Interesting. 40% of the variation in promiscuous behavior in women could be attributed to genes. 40%. That is surprising since, as Dr. Zeich points out, there are so many other factors that are necessary for what he referred to as promiscuous encounters, like circumstance, for example, and the availability of a willing and able partner. After all, without a partner, how can one cheat? Other studies confirm that oxytocin and vasopressin are linked to partner bonding, which bears on the question of promiscuity, quote-unquote, since emotional bonding is, in a certain sense, the inverse of promiscuity. Hasse Wallum of the Karolinska Institute in Stockholm found that in women, but not in men, there is a significant association between one variant of the oxytocin receptor gene and marital discord and lack of affection for one's partner. In contrast, there was a significant correlation in men between a specific variant of the vasopressin receptor gene and lower marital quality as reported by their spouses. You may recall from a recent episode of Explore Ecstatic Sensuality, in which we discussed male orgasm, that in men there is also an associated release and elevation of oxytocin levels after orgasm. Oxytocin is strongly associated with empathy. It facilitates trust and attachment. Studies have shown that oxytocin is correlated with romantic attachment. Research suggests that oxytocin may help promote fidelity within monogamous relationship. So men who have real orgasms as opposed to mere ejaculations, and who are in monogamous romantic relationships, are going to be less likely to cheat. Experiments in which oxytocin and vasopressin are directly administered to humans show that these hormones have effects that go far beyond sex. They appear to increase trust and social bonding overall. In one study, giving vasopressin enhanced the subject's memory for both happy and angry faces compared with the placebo, which implies that vasopressin could boost both social affiliation and aggressive behavior since it increased social and emotional learning. Now, the evolutionary benefits of promiscuity for men, as we've discussed, is pretty straightforward. The more sexual partners you have, the greater your potential reproductive success. But women's reproductive capacity is more limited by biology. So what's in it for women? There may be no clear evolutionary advantage to female infidelity, but sex has never been just about procreation. That's a message I'd like to communicate very strongly to you out there in my Explore Ecstatic Sensuality audience. Sex has never been solely about procreation. Cheating can be intensely pleasurable because, among other things, it involves novelty and a degree of sensation-seeking, behaviors that activate the brain's reward circuit. In a 2010 study of 181 young, healthy adults, Justin R. Garcia, then at Binghamton University, said that subjects who carried a variant of one dopamine receptor subtype, the D4 receptor, were 50% more likely to report sexual infidelity. This D4 genetic variant has reduced binding for dopamine, which implies that these individuals walk around at baseline feeling less stimulated and therefore hungrier for novelty than those lacking this genetic variant. Does this mean that everyone should insist on getting potential relationships partners blood tested prior to even going out on a date? I think I'm going to start a business to do exactly that. Anyone want to invest? I could be the next Elizabeth Theranos Holmes. Get your dates blood tested before you go out with them. Fascinating. Then there's the other question. That is to say, whether personality characteristics or traits can predict if a person is likely to cheat or not. Psychology, like many other things in modern society, insists on putting everyone in a box. There are three main models of personality traits: the EPQ, the Big Five, and the Dark Triad. The Eysenck Personality Questionnaire, or EPQ, was devised by Hans-Jürgen Eysenck and Sybil B.J. Eysenck, both of whom believed that personality differences were determined by physiology and genetic inheritance. They tested individuals in three categories: extroversion versus introversion, neuroticism versus stability, and psychoticism versus socialization. Those who score high on extroversion are sociable, impulsive, and sensation-seeking. Those who score high on neuroticism are, on the other hand, anxious, moody, and have low self-esteem. And those who score high on psychoticism are aggressive, manipulative, and egocentric. The personality traits measured by the Big Five model are somewhat different. Openness to new experience. Is a person inventive and curious, or consistent and cautious? Conscientiousness. Is a person efficient and organized, or extravagant and careless? Extroversion. Is a person outgoing and energetic, or solitary and reserved? Agreeableness. Is a person friendly and compassionate, or critical and hyper-rational? And finally, neuroticism. Is a person sensitive and nervous, or resilient and confident? Now, a key difference, as you may have noted, between the Big Five system and the EPQ is that the Big Five leaves out psychoticism. And we're going to see that psychoticism may be extremely significant in the area of infidelity and cheating. Well, let's go on. In a study published in the Journal of Research and Personality, David M. Buss and Todd K. Shackelford studied 107 married couples to find out which factors are possible predictors of infidelity. Personality factors most strongly linked to susceptibility to infidelity were low conscientiousness, high narcissism, and high psychoticism. Relationship context most strongly linked to susceptibility to infidelity include sexual dissatisfaction and specific sources of conflict, such as partner complaints about jealousy. In research published in the Journal of Social and Personal Relationships, Algelt, Reyes, French, Meltzer, and McNulty pooled data from 2 3-year longitudinal studies of newlywed couples to examine the associations between couple members' personality traits, including the Big Five model plus narcissism, and infidelity, controlling and not controlling for marital satisfaction. Wives high in extroversion and husbands and wives with partners high in neuroticism or extroversion were more likely to engage in infidelity regardless of whether they controlled, that is, these researchers control for satisfaction. Husbands with partners high in neuroticism were more likely to engage in infidelity, though this effect was no longer significant when controlling for satisfaction. Unlike other studies, these psychologists looked at both members of a couple, not only the cheater, but the person who was cheated on. So, if you are in a relationship with a neurotic or extroverted partner, you will be more likely to cheat. And if you are a guy with a narcissistic wife or girlfriend, you will be more likely to cheat. This is what science tells us. In an article published in the journal Personality and Individual Differences, Gail Brewer, Danielle Hunt, Gail James, and Lauren Abel present a study based on the dark Triad model, which is different from the other models we've discussed so far, the EPQ and the Big Five. Dark Triad traits, narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy, are characterized by manipulation, emotional coldness, and a lack of empathy. Their study investigated the influence of the dark triad on heterosexual women's infidelity and romantic revenge. Findings demonstrated that dark triad traits predict prior experience of infidelity, intentions to engage in future infidelity, and perceived susceptibility to a partner's infidelity. Narcissism and secondary psychopathy were the most influential, that is to say, the most predictive traits. They also looked into the relationship between dark triad personality traits and revenge, one's likelihood to seek, tempt revenge. Dark triad traits predicted each type of revenge assessed except willingness to terminate the relationship. Interesting. Now let's move on to other predictors of cheating. In a study published in the Journal of Marriage and Family, Judith Treese and Deidre Giesen reported that nationally represented survey data show higher likelihood of sexual infidelity among those with stronger sexual interests, more permissive sexual values, lower satisfaction with their union, and weaker network ties to a partner, as well as greater sexual opportunities. With these factors controlled, gender differences are substantially reduced or eliminated. I'm particularly interested in this notion that weaker network ties to a partner increase the likelihood of infidelity. If one is in a network, if one has mutual friends, if you're not just a isolated couple without a particular social network supporting you as a couple or even a dating relationship, then you are more likely to cheat, to be unfaithful, than if you did have those things, if you were part of a social group. You see things like this. You see couples that are going out, dating, almost even marrying, who really have no connection. They don't have mutual friends. They don't have any kind of social life outside of that particular sexual type of relationship sort of a deal. And those couples, the members of those couples, are probably going to be more likely to cheat. Not so much of a surprise. In an article published in Evolutionary Psychology, Rebecca J. Brand, Charlotte M. Markey, Anna Mills, and Sarah D. Hodges reported on a study of hundreds of individuals to determine if differences in gender, whether a person is male or female, is a good predictor of whether an individual is likely to cheat. It's a very basic dichotomy. You're either a guy or a girl. Well, using a broad definition of cheating, women reported being as unfaithful or more unfaithful than men. Men, on the other hand, were more suspicious about cheating and more likely to discover the cheating was taking place, than women. Women were more likely to break up with their partners, to begin new relationships after cheating, and to report reasons for cheating that may indicate a desire to switch long-term mates, such as being unhappy in their current relationship. This study goes against the popular notion, as reflected in most films and television shows, that men are the cheaters and women are the ones most likely to be cheated on. In research published in the Personality and Social Psychology Bulletin, Julie H. Hall and Frank D. Fincham asked the question of whether psychological distress was a precursor to or a consequence of infidelity. Based on two very substantial studies, they concluded that initial levels of psychological distress predicted later infidelity. If you're distressed, you're much more likely, or at least statistically more likely, to be unfaithful, to cheat. However, infidelity did not predict subsequent psychological distress. Individuals reported entering into extradyadic involvements at a time when they felt emotionally vulnerable. Low self-esteem and low self-acceptance are also associated with infidelity, not so much of a surprise. Furthermore, some individuals describe extradyadic involvement, that is to say cheating, as an attempt to enhance their self-confidence and/or combat a sense of inadequacy. Hall and Fincham had hypothesized that initial levels of relationship satisfaction would predict infidelity. However, this turned out not to be the case. Individuals who engage in infidelity may be dissatisfied with their primary relationship, but this satisfaction does not appear to drive extradyadic involvement. People don't cheat because they're not satisfied with their relationship. This is going to be very surprising to many, many people, and to a certain extent, it was for me. Furthermore, individuals who engaged in extradyadic behaviors, who cheated, did not appear to experience significant decreases in satisfaction with their primary relationships. So, if Jerry is in a relationship with Diane and he goes out and cheats with Sylvia, he is still going to be satisfied in his relationship with Diane. Does this run contrary to your expectations? Perhaps in this sense the cheating is a kind of a condiment, a savor, a spice. And you come home from your cheating episode and you go back and you're still very satisfied with your regular, committed, if you might want to call it that, partner. Wow, that's a possibility. I don't promote this, but I'm just speculating, given these very interesting results. What are the reasons psychologists give for people cheating? In an article published in the Journal of Social and Personal Relationships, William D. Barta and Susan M. Keene reported a four-factor model predicting romantic infidelity, including dissatisfaction, neglect, sex, that is, problems with sex, and anger as distinct motivation variables. Using a sample of college students, whoa, those poor kids, particularly the ones majoring in psychology like I did, including both those with and without infidelity experiences, their model yielded a better statistical fit than the alternative hypothesized two-factor model of sexual and emotional motivations. In Barta and Keene's model, dissatisfaction refers to a lack of positive feelings about one's partner or relationship. Quote, I had fallen out of love with my study partner, unquote, and seeking fulfillment elsewhere. Neglect refers to feeling mistreatment, maltreatment from one's partner. My study partner wasn't spending enough time with me. These are both consistent with relationship deficit models. Sex, as a factor, refers to an interest in greater sexual frequency and sexual variety. My steady partner wasn't interested in sexual activities that I find exciting. And here we're going back to our overarching theme of sensuality. If you're a truly sensual person, you're much more likely, in my opinion, to fulfill your partner's sexual needs and your own at the same time. Anyway, anger in these researchers' model refers to a desire to punish the primary partner because of a transgression. I wanted to get back at my study partner for something he or she did. The authors claim that because in the clinical literature, unfaithful individuals often report multiple occurrences of infidelity with numerous extradyadic partners, it is the underlying relationship deficits that are the true source of most infidelity motivations, with some personality traits predicting greater likelihood, and some motivations. Interesting. Dissatisfaction, neglect, sexual issues, and anger, according to Barta and Keene. Moving on from this analysis is an article published in the Journal of Sex Research by Dylan Selterman, Justin R. Garcia, and Irene Seplas, who expanded Barta and Keene's list of 4 factors, which we just mentioned, to 8. 1. Anger. 2. Sexual desire. 3. Lack of love. 4. Low commitment. 5. Esteem. 6. Situation. 7. Neglect. And 8. Variety. Interestingly, contrary to the other researchers we've already discussed today, none of the effects hypothesized involving the Big Five personality traits emerged as significant. Fascinating. So, these are the 4 factors again: anger, sexual desire, lack of love, low commitment, esteem, the situation present in the relationship, neglect, and variety are the factors which, according to these researchers, are the predictors of infidelity, not the Big Five personality traits. Neuroticism and agreeableness were not associated with infidelity motivated by anger. Neuroticism was not associated with infidelity motivated by neglect. And extroversion and gender were not associated with infidelity motivated by either lack of love or commitment. In the journal Psychological Sciences, Joris Lammers, Janka E. Stoker, Jennifer Jordan, Monique Pohlmann, and Diederik A. Stoppel compiled data from a survey of 1,561 professionals to examine the relationship between power and infidelity. Their results show that elevated power is positively associated with infidelity because power increases confidence in the ability to attract partners. I certainly know this. At any rate, this association was found for both actual infidelity and intentions to engage in infidelity in the future. Now, gender did not moderate these results. The relationship between power and infidelity was the same for women as for men, and for the same reasons. These findings suggest that the common assumption, often found in the literature and on TV and so forth, that women are less likely than men to engage in infidelity is, at least partly, a reflection of traditional gender-based differences in power that exist in society. The assumption is that the man is going to be the powerful one. Not anymore, and that's a good thing. Now, if your boyfriend or girlfriend has cheated in another relationship, are they likely to cheat with you? Or they're serial cheaters, just as there are serial killers and serial monogamists, and serial composers like me, but we'll not discuss that in today's episode. A study published in the Archives of Sexual Behavior reported that those who reported cheating in their first relationship were 3 times more likely to report cheating in the next relationship compared to those who did not report engaging in cheating in the first relationship. Similarly, compared to those who reported that their first relationship partners did not cheat, those who knew that their partners in the first relationships had cheated were twice as likely to report the same behavior from their next relationship partners. Wow. So, those who reported their first relationship partners of cheating were 4 times more likely to report suspicion of cheating again in their next relationship. Thus, prior infidelity emerged as an important risk factor for infidelity in next relationships. Interesting, just as an aside, everything here assumes that there's a relationship at stake, that there's some kind of coupleness that we're talking about, that people are, what's that old term that you see in old movies, maybe before I was born, that people were going steady and singing songs about all that sort of thing. And from what I've observed throughout the relatively short period of my life, a lot of people just go out and go on dates and end up sleeping together. Then they call these things disparagingly one-night stands, but what are they really? They're like sex is a fun activity, an enjoyable, essential activity in which people engage without any conception, without any imagined outcome of a relationship or a steady dating. You know, sex doesn't have to happen on the first date. It's nice sometimes, it doesn't have to, or even on the second or the third, but even when sex happens in a context like that, we're not assuming a relationship is going to take place. Just wanted to add that as a little side note to what we're talking about here today. In an article published in the Journal of Social Psychology, Gary W. Lewandowski and Robert A. Ackerman asked another interesting question. When a relationship is not able to fulfill an individual's needs or provide ample self-expansion, does that individual's susceptibility to infidelity increase? As far as needs are concerned, the ones they concentrated on were intimacy, companionship, sex, security, and emotional involvement. Their results indicated that when relationship needs were not fulfilled, participants in their study reported being more susceptible to committing relationship infidelity. So if a person is not getting intimacy, companionship, sex, security, and emotional involvement with their partner, they're going to cheat. This should come as not terribly great surprise, but at least here it's confirmed by the psychologist. The self-expansion factors they identified were inclusion of the other in the self, we'll explain that in a moment, and potential for self-expansion. Individuals achieve self-expansion, another key theme of our podcast here, by acquiring new resources, perspectives, skills, abilities, insights, and the like, that result in increased self-efficacy and an enhanced sense of self. One way in which an individual achieves self-expansion is by sharing activities and experiences with their current partner. An individual's engagement in activities that are expanding, i.e., novel and challenging, is negatively correlated with his or her boredom and positively correlated with relationship quality and excitement. Okay, but it's good to see this in print. It's good to see the psychologist emphasizing this. The self-expansion model further indicates that self-expansion is facilitated by inclusion of the other in the self. We're not talking about incorporation, or we're not talking about taking over. We're talking about inclusion of one's relationship partner in oneself. And we're particularly not talking about dominance. This process involves viewing one's relationship partner as part of the self, so that the distinction of the self and the other blurs. That is, a blending of self and other in regards to resources, characteristics, and skills results in self-expansion, and this is for both parties in the relationship. If a relationship provides insufficient self-expansion, an individual in that relationship may be motivated to meet their expansion needs through other sources, such as an extradyadic relationship, that is to say, by cheating. Similarly, if a person feels that he or she cannot include the partner in the self, a greater susceptibility to infidelity may result. So if a person is passionate about music, some particular type of music, klezmer music or whatever, and that musical activity, that musical dream, that musical force, musical power is their means of self-expansion, and that person feels that he or she cannot include their partner in that self-expansion, there is going to be a susceptibility to infidelity on that person's part, on both parties' parts. And if two people in a relationship have these individual passions, it's great. Let's share one another's passions. Let's become involved in one another's passions. Is there any reason not to do that? Should a person be isolated and alone with their passions? If I'm a motorcycle fiend, fanatic? Must I spend all of my motorcycle concentration with my motorcycle bike riding buddies and not let my girlfriend into that? Well, a lot of women are into that. Why not? So that's that for the moment for this whole notionship of self-expansion, which is, again, one of the major theme of this podcast. In an article published in Marriage and Family Review, Tara M. Emers-Summer, Kathleen Warber, and Jeff Halford identified additional predictors of cheating. Among both women and men, the predictors they identified were quality of alternatives, believing that sex occurs early in a relationship, that's a belief that some people have, and having been cheated on, the latter applying solely to men. So, quality of alternatives predicted cheating among seriously dated individuals, whereas marrieds reported the strongest predictor of cheating as being cheated on. Participants in their study reported over 500 reasons to remain faithful and over 1,000 reasons to cheat. If I were doing a call-in or one of those online surveys where you check things, I would really like everyone to submit reasons to cheat and see if we could reach 1,000. That would be quite a challenge. Okay, here's another area which is really important. British psychologist John Bowlby is created with the formation of attachment theory, a psychological, evolutionary, and ethological theory concerning relationships between humans at various levels, parental and then going on through life. Of course, the nature and intensity of a lover's attachment to her or his partner is crucial in examining any relationship and perhaps also predicting its success. In an article published in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology, authors from Northwestern University and elsewhere reported that people with high levels of dispositional avoidant attachment had more permissive attitudes toward infidelity, showed attentional bias toward attractive alternative partners, expressed greater interest in meeting alternatives to their current relationship partner, and perceived alternatives to their current relationship partner more positively. So let's again talk about this whole notion of attachment. They're not synonyms, but we can kind of talk about attachment and commitment more or less in the same breath. You can be attached emotionally and attached in many other ways without having the type of commitment that involves, again, saying, we're going steady, we're absolutely 100% exclusive, we're on a pro-marital track. This is going to be something lifelong, But attachment doesn't necessarily involve all of that list of things. So we're talking about people who have a unattached way of dealing with their partners. That's their term for that is avoidant attachment. You avoid attachment in various ways. Those people are going to be more permissive in their attitudes toward infidelity. They're going to be looking for other people, looking over their shoulders, looking under the table, looking wherever you look for someone else who might be a more attractive partner, relationship partner. That's just the deal. This unattached type of person is always on the prowl throughout life. There are people like that. Have you known any of them? I certainly have. I'm not necessarily one of them. Jean-Vieux Boulot-Pelletier, Frederick R. Philippe, Serge Lecoeur, and Stéphane Couture also did research in the area of attachment and attachment style, which they published in the journal Attachment and Human Development, of all places. They found that attachment avoidance was positively associated with extradyadic sex, with cheating, while attachment anxiety was unrelated to it. These results were maintained after controlling for sexual satisfaction, sexual desire, gender, and age. They concluded that attachment avoidance increases people's irritation relative to their partner's desire for engagement, that is to say, commitment in this case, which in turn increases their likelihood to cheat. So a person who is avoidant in terms of being attached to the person that they're with is going to be annoyed, irritated with their partner's desire for engagement, desire for attachment, even for commitment, and so those people are the ones who are going to be likely to cheat. No surprise. It sort of all depends on what you're looking for. I was saying a few moments ago, if you're looking to just have fun with sensuality and sex, which this podcast does not put down, or if you're looking for a relationship, of which there are many, many types. Perhaps we should allow for the existence of more types than many people do. Finally, in a certain way just for fun, but not really for this first part of our examination of cheating, in an article published in the journal Evolutionary Psychology, Gilliam J. M. O'Connor, Daniel E. Ree, and David R. Feinberg reported that men attributed high infidelity risk to feminized women's voices, but not significantly more than did women. So it's women who speak in that very ultra-feminized way. I think I don't have to demonstrate it because it is not capable of doing it, but you get the general idea. Both men and women feel that these women have a high infidelity risk. Fascinating. On the other hand, women attributed high infidelity risk to masculinized, that is to say to low, resonant men's voices, at significantly higher rates than did men. These data suggest that voice pitch is used as an indicator of sexual strategy in addition to underlying mate value. The authors suggest that these associations of voice pitch with likelihood to cheat may be adaptive if they prevent cuckoldry and or loss of relationship investment via avoidance of partners who may be more likely to be unfaithful. So, am I going to avoid women with these very, sexy girly girl voices, Marilyn Monroe kind of voice, because statistically they're demonstrated as being more susceptible to cheating? So on the other hand, I guess that with my low resonant stentorian voice, I'm just plain out of luck. Women go after guys with high-pitched voices, don't they? Before we proceed, here are two addenda to Part 1, in which we reviewed biological, personality, and relational factors which may lead to cheating. In a study published in the Brazilian journal Temas em Psicologia, Patricia Sharon, Inigo de Alda Martinez de Apalanis, and Adriana Wagner did a study in which around 15% of the women and 20% of the men had an agreement with the partner in which it was possible to be involved with a person outside the relationship. In other words, these individuals were in relationships which were mutually defined as open. In an extremely interesting result, these researchers found that there was no association between having an open relationship, defined again as a combination in which it is possible to be emotionally/sexually involved with others, and the loving condition or status of the primary relationship. The levels of marital adjustment also did not differ between those who had an open relationship and those who did not. So, a man or a woman could be in an open relationship and still be in a loving, well-adjusted relationship with their primary partner. So, a man or a woman could be in an open relationship and still be in a loving, well-adjusted relationship with their primary partner, although these researchers state that simply choosing an open relationship does not guarantee higher levels of marital satisfaction. But all the same, maybe it's the way to go. And I will be looking at open relationships and also polyamory in a future episode here of Explore Ecstatic Sensuality. A vital conclusion of this research was the importance of communication in relationships. Their data indicate that the majority of the individuals whom they studied did not talk about the topic of infidelity with their partner, and 44.4% did not agree with their partner about what it is to be unfaithful. Communication. Communication. Communication is part of love. Communication is part of sensuality. Anyone have a dispute with that? Let's have a duel, water pistols at dawn, someplace nice like Tahiti. And finally, in a study published in the journal Personality and Individual Differences, Dana A. Weiser and Daniel J. Weigel looked at cheating from the perspective of the infidelity partner, i.e., the other man-woman to an exclusive romantic relationship. In other words, the person with whom one member of the couple cheats, and explored the personality profile of these cheating individuals. Needless to say, it is easy, or perhaps merely convenient, to characterize these other people as the bad guys / bad girls, who appear to cause trouble for relationships and even to break them up, although one assumes not usually deliberately. They're not trying to do it, they just there to have sex or whatever. Or is that an invalid assumption, that they're not doing it intentionally? At any rate, based on a sample of 180 other people, findings indicate that most infidelity partners initially do not know that they're engaging in infidelity, but less than half ended the relationship upon learning of the infidelity. That is to say, upon learning that the person with whom they're having sex was cheating on someone. They simply carried on. Low agreeableness, remember our personality traits in the Big Five? Low agreeableness appears to be a core trait to help explain why some individuals are willing to be an infidelity partner and conceal their transgression. Individuals higher on anxious attachment and an unrestricted sociosexual orientation appear to be more likely to be infidelity partners. So if you're in a relationship, be on the lookout for these sorts of people. If your boyfriend or girlfriend has friends who fit these descriptions, instruct your boyfriend or girlfriend to give them the boot. Yeah, right. Now for the second part of our episode on cheating, in which we are going to turn to emotional and other responses, real and imagined, to cheating. We'll begin with some research on imagined responses to sexual infidelity. In a study published in the journal Research in Psychology and Behavioral Sciences, 437 male and female college students from the U.S. read imagined scenarios of infidelity, manipulated for discovery method, close friend tells, partner's best friend tells, stranger tells, questioning partner, caught partner, and partner confesses. An infidelity act, sex, massage, falling in love, bought present, went out to dinner, and kissing. Participants rated how upsetting each scenario was and the likelihood they would forgive their partner if this were to happen to them. Sexual infidelity was rated the most upsetting and least forgivable imagined infidelity act by both men and women, especially when imagining the infidelity act was being discovered in person, e.g. walking in on your girlfriend in flagrante delicto with your best friend, or maybe with your best friend's girlfriend. Discovering infidelity by means of a stranger was the least upsetting and most likely to be forgiven. Contrary to previous findings, men were less upset by all types of imagined infidelity than women, and men were also more likely to forgive their girlfriends or wives' indiscretions. That is to say, to forgive their wives or girlfriends' cheating. One could speculate and theorize on the basis of this finding, which will probably be surprising to many. Does the man think, you got that out of your system, baby, and then came back to me? Therefore, our relationship is not really threatened? Is he even excited, erotically excited, by the thought that his girlfriend has had another experience on the side? It would be interesting to ask how a man would react if he were told that his girlfriend had cheated with another woman, or how a woman would react if she were told that her boyfriend had cheated with another man. On a darker note, but one which must nevertheless be intoned, many studies have shown that the most common cause of wife battering and wife beating is male sexual jealousy, which also appears to be the cause of many husband killings. In a sample of 47 murders precipitated by a jealous man, 9 of the murdered men were killed in self-defense by the woman accused of infidelity. Was she justified to do that? At any rate, in a study published in the journal Personality and Social Psychology, Shackelford and Buss, whom we mentioned earlier, asked the question, what leads men and women to suspect that their partners have been unfaithful? They draw a distinction, which other psychologists have done as well, between sexual infidelity and emotional infidelity. Sexual infidelity is exactly what the term denotes. Emotional infidelity, on the other hand, occurs when one's partner channels emotional resources, such as romantic love and time and attention, to someone else. Shackelford and Buss contend that men who have affairs are more likely to do so without emotional involvement, whereas when women have affairs, emotional involvement is often a key component. Men display greater psychological and physiological distress when examining their wives' or girlfriends' sexual involvement with another person, whereas women show greater distress when they imagine their husbands' or boyfriends' emotional involvement with someone else. These psychologists also wanted to find out, on the basis of what factors a woman or a man can successfully diagnose infidelity, can guess that their boyfriend or girlfriend is cheating. For sexual infidelity, the most diagnostic factors were reluctance to spend time with their partners, reluctance to discuss a certain other person, being argumentative with or critical toward their partner, being passive-aggressive or inconsiderate toward their partner, being emotionally disengaged from their partner, being apathetic toward their partner, and acting guilty or anxious toward their partner. The diagnostic factors for emotional infidelity did not change with the existence of one other factor, sexual disinterest or boredom with the partner. Interesting. What can we learn from this? Well, these are the clues you can use to determine if your girlfriend or boyfriend or wife or husband is cheating. These are the telltale signs of infidelity. But then the question arises, what should you do if you see these telltale signs, especially if several of them are readily apparent? Confrontation? That would make you appear paranoid. Overreaction in the form of being extra nice? Then your girlfriend or boyfriend may well figure out that you're suspicious. These are troubling waters with many sharks and barnacles lurking under the seemingly placid surface. As Jacques Lacan said in his seminar 3, The Psychoses, and I quote, "You can test this while reading Freud or almost any other author. You will find pages, sometimes entire chapters, on paranoia. Take them out of their context, read them aloud, and you will see the most beautiful descriptions of the behavior of everyone." Perhaps in a certain way, people are most entertaining. This is really cynical comment, when they're being paranoid. Looking at the same matter from the perspective of human evolution, which is still the most likely explanation of how we became what we are now, rather than remaining microbes or plankton, or dinosaurs even. In a study published in Evolution and Human Behavior, researchers Shaki Eldor, Adi Peri-Paldi, Gilad Hirschenberger, and Gerrit E. Birnbaum, plus Danny Deutsch, tested a new infidelity detection model, the rivalry sensitivity hypothesis. This model posits that women are more sensitive to cues of infidelity than men are, and tend to focus their attention on potential rivals in their male's vicinity, whereas men show increased sensitivity to their own partners. Interesting. In a series of 4 studies, these researchers found that women displayed greater alertness to cues of potential partner unfaithfulness than did men, were quicker and more accurate in detecting cues of infidelity, but were not better than men in detecting other sorts of threats. Women also focused their attention on potential rivals, that is to say, other women, whereas men's attention was specifically directed at monitoring their own partner's intents. These findings suggest that women and men have developed different strategies aimed at achieving a similar outcome, mate retention, as they refer to it. In an article published in the journal Cognition and Emotion, Todd Shackelford, once again, this time with co-authors Gregory J. LeBlanc and Elizabeth Dross, continued their investigation of how sexual infidelity may differ from emotional infidelity. In this study, they sought to identify emotional reactions to a partner's sexual infidelity and emotional infidelity. Their analysis revealed that there were 15 standard emotional reactions or feelings to infidelity. Check these out. Undesirable insecure includes emotions such as feeling inferior and undesirable. Hostile vengeful covers the two related dimensions of hostility and vengeance. Depressed covers a range of depressive emotions from sad to miserable. Helpless abandoned taps feelings of helplessness as indicated by the high loadings of powerlessness, hopelessness, and feelings of abandonment, as indicated by high loading of the feeling of neglect, being neglected. Happy covers emotions such as delighted and glad. Shock includes emotions such as astounded and alarmed. Nauseated repulsed covers symptoms of acute physical illness such as nausea and feeling sickened. Blameworthy includes emotions associated with feeling responsible for a partner's infidelity, such as guilty for the partner's infidelity. Content relieved differs from the other components in that the emotions included in this component, such as content and serene, are relatively positive or neutral. Humiliated includes emotions such as embarrassed and foolish. Sexually aroused includes just two emotions, aroused and sexually aroused. Tired taps an emotional physical state that includes items such as sleepy, bored, and droopy. Homicidal suicidal includes violent and illustrates that emotional reactions to infidelity can motivate destructive behaviors. Anxious covers emotions that tap anxiety, including feelings of being tense and worried. Forgiving indexes the understanding and forgiveness one has for a partner's infidelity. The results of this research were interesting but not necessarily surprising. Men provided higher ratings than women in reaction to a partner's infidelity for content relieved, homicidal suicidal, happy, and sexually aroused. Wait a minute. So men's reactions to their wives or girlfriends cheating are rather schizoid. Some men are happy, relieved, and turned on, while others are inclined toward violence. Women, by contrast, provided higher ratings than men for nauseated and repulsed, depressed, undesirable insecure, helpless, abandoned, and anxious. So women are quite unlikely to be pleasantly surprised and sexually excited when they find out that their boyfriends or husbands are cheating, nor are they as likely as men to feel violent emotions. Instead, they turn their negative emotions inward toward themselves, thus corroding their self-respect and self-love. And in a certain way, they take the blame for their boyfriends' and husbands' infidelity. They take it on themselves. They're to blame. This is how society is set up and has been going back to the Garden of Eden, as we discussed in our episode, The Death of the Goddess. And this also reminds us of a major theme of this podcast. Each person in a relationship must not only encourage but and this also reminds us of a major theme, an overarching theme of this podcast series. Each person in a relationship must not only encourage but facilitate their partner's self-love. And it's not a matter of a guy telling his girlfriend, "You should feel good about yourself because you got such a great, handsome, successful boyfriend." That is saying that the woman is supposed to depend on the man for her self-esteem, which is 1,000% wrong. In other research published in the journal Cognition and Emotion, Shackelford, Buss, and Bennett focused specifically on the issue of forgiveness, or to put it another way, forgiveness as a result of an infidelity scenario versus breakup as a result of an infidelity scenario. They found that men, relative to women, A, find it more difficult to forgive a sexual infidelity than an emotional infidelity, and B, are more likely to terminate a current relationship following a partner's sexual infidelity than an emotional infidelity. As I see it, this fits very well with the last study we discussed. Women are more likely to stick it out when their boyfriends or husbands cheat and to take the blame on themselves and to suffer by themselves. This demonstrates again how misogyny permeates our society. In the first part of today's episode on cheating, we discussed the hormonal and chemical factors which are believed by some to precipitate infidelity. So we thought that we would look at the neuroscientific research on reactions to infidelity. In an article published in the journal Neuroimage, a group of Japanese scientists used functional magnetic resonance, fMRI, imaging to study gender differences in responses to sexual and emotional infidelity. Although there was no sex difference in the self-rating score of jealousy for sexual and emotional infidelity, men and women showed different brain activation patterns in response to the two types of infidelity, the two types of cheating, if you can call emotional infidelity cheating, which I would dispute. We'll talk about that later. During jealous conditions, men demonstrated greater activation than women in the brain regions involved in sexual aggressive behaviors, such as the amygdala and hypothalamus. By contrast, women demonstrated greater activation in the posterior superior temporal sulcus. Now that may sound like a lot of medical gibberish to you, but wait, what does this posterior superior temporal sulcus thingamajig do other than being activated by jealousy and sexual infidelity? In a study by Brent C. Vanderwyck, Caitlin M. Hudak, Elizabeth J. Carter, David M. Sobel, and Kevin A. Perfrey, published in the journal Psychological Science, the researchers studied the importance of this STS region in the perception of social acts. They concluded that the STS region is vital to a person's ability to correctly attribute a person's intentions to their action, not only to observe an action, but to correctly attribute the person's intentions in performing that action. When a woman, especially, views an action on the part of a person which is incongruent with that person's prior emotional expression, her STS is activated. Or does an individual whose STS has been activated, as it is in women who respond to cheating, become more finely attuned to everything, even conceivably to their partner's thoughts? Guys who cheat often go around with a feeling she knows running through their minds. And very often she does. Women's minds are evolutionarily tuned to pick up on these things and to understand men's intentions. Women really do have us all figured out. And by the way, there's a whole area of psychology called mind reading. And mind reading is not about the usual things that we discuss in terms of thought transference in the conventional sense. Mind reading is a psychological study of how sensitive we can be to someone so that we actually understand what they're thinking. My contention is that women have this much more strongly than men do. Why do you see all these psychic signs for women on the street? In a study published in the journal Personality and Individual Differences, M. Rosie Schrauta and Daniel J. Weigel, once again, discussed the mental health symptoms often experienced by the person cheated upon, including post-traumatic stress disorder, depression, and anxiety, and protective factors that lessen these harmful effects. Interestingly, they found that attributing causality and responsibility to, in other words, blaming their cheating partner for the infidelity, led to more stress and more mental health symptoms. The more non-involved partners, that is to say the partners who were cheated on, perceived that their partners caused and were responsible for the infidelity, the more overwhelmed they felt, possibly draining their adaptive capabilities and aggravating their depression and anxiety symptoms. Individuals with poorer self-perceptions experience greater stress after a partner's infidelity, possibly due to their tendency to see these relationship events as negative and their having limited coping resources to contend to deal with these events. However, for individuals with high self-esteem, their positive self-perceptions protected against the harmful effects of negative self-appraisals, reducing their stress response. Likewise, infidelity-related stress had a weaker association with depression and anxiety among those with high self-esteem than those with low self-esteem. High self-esteem provides these individuals with the ability to handle the turmoil of the infidelity and to see the future in a more positive light. If you love yourself, you will see the future in a much brighter light than if you don't. In research published in the journal Sex Roles, Shirley P. Glass and Thomas L. Wright found that women believe their affairs to be more emotional than sexual, and men believe their affairs to be more sexual than emotional. It is possible that women experience guilt over emotional infidelity because they actually perceive their relationships to be primarily emotional. In contrast, because men perceive their affairs to be primarily sexual, their guilt is focused on the sexual aspects of the relationship. So, wait a minute. It seems to me that emotionality is so much an important factor for women in relationships, and men in many ways are not capable, are not attuned to respond to it, to cope with it, to deal with it, to embrace it. We'll be talking about this in future episodes. So much of society is influenced, even determined, by guilt and shame. So, of course, research has been done on sex differences in feelings of guilt after cheating. In an article by Marianne Fisher, Martin Voracek, P. Vivian Rekas, and Anthony Cox, published in Evolutionary Psychology, these psychologists praised guilt, saying, and we quote, "Within social species, guilt, which is associated with the threat of doing harm and the desire for reparation, shapes the behavior of individuals and determines their social standing and acceptance within the group. One purpose of guilt is to stimulate individuals to examine the hardship they cause others through their actions, and as a consequence, to evoke reparative behaviors, to try to fix things, to make things better, to do repairs afterwards. Once a transgression has been committed, guilt may help to reestablish the individual as a member of the group by motivating reparative behaviors, the kinds we just referred to. In the case of infidelity, the display of guilt might help rebuild trust by indicating to the offended party, the one cheated on, that the perpetrator does not plan to repeat the behavior. And yet, how many people have you known who are what they call guilt-ridden? There are those who feel that they are responsible for everything and anything that goes on. Exaggerated and inappropriate feelings of guilt and shame are certainly related to and caused by low self-esteem. Yes, one should take responsibility. This is a hallmark of my code of personal ethics. But not everything is my fault. Many things occur in life that are not anyone's fault. But back to guilt as it relates to cheating. Frank Pittman, in his book Private Lies, Infidelity and the Betrayal of Intimacy, asserted that sexual infidelities differ in the extent to which they are intentional. Infidelities may occur unexpectedly, unplanned. They take at least one of the participants by surprise. Intentional infidelity is another kettle of fish altogether. When George is in a relationship with Sally, and he goes off and cheats with Jane with the intention of hurting Sally, this is what the researchers referred to as intentional infidelity. In an article published in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology, K.M. McGraw observed that, quote, cheaters are more likely to offer concessions and excuses to their partners following an unintentional infidelity, while cheaters would be more likely to present silence, refusals, and justifications following an intentional infidelity. In research published in the journal Communications Monographs, Paul A. Mongo, Gerald L. Hale, and Marmi Alice looked at gender differences in the attribution of intentionality as we have defined it here. They found that male participants in their study perceived the female's infidelity as more intentional than the male's infidelity. Back to George, Sally, and Jane. If Jane cheats on George with Paul, George is going to assume that Jane did it to hurt him, with the intention of hurting him, perhaps out of revenge. But when George cheats on Sally with Jane, Sally is also going to attribute intent to George's cheating. That intent being to hurt Sally. Hurt. Sad, sad thing. If you have ever been cheated on, think of the scenario. Think of what happened. We have talked about what sort of people cheat and the reasons for cheating, and we have also talked about various responses people have to cheating. Could it be that your boyfriend or girlfriend or wife cheated to hurt you, to get back at you, to have revenge on you? Or maybe because they thought that you were cheating yourself or had cheated them in the past. Or were being emotionally unfaithful to them. Or they cheated to assert a sort of dominance over you. Or to say, your bond to me is so strong. Or to say, your bond to me is so strong. Or, you are in such total and absolute love with me that I can get away with anything. The entire notion of emotional infidelity makes me wax wroth. I have women friends whom I will love all my life, whom I will love emotionally. We may even be physically affectionate short of actual intercourse. And this is the case whether or not I am in a relationship at any given time. Because I feel this sort of love and affection for a woman does not mean that I want to sleep with her. Perhaps I wanted to sleep with her, or even did sleep with her in the past. But I am not going to cut off my women friends or become cold and distant with them because I am in a relationship. I want to share these women friends with a woman I'm in a relationship with, so that they may even become friends themselves. I feel the same way about my girlfriend's male friends, even former boyfriends. Relationships, like everything else in life, are about expansion, not contraction, not limiting. They're about opening up new horizons, not closing them down. It goes without saying that all relationships are not, quote, conventional, unquote, to use the old-fashioned mid-20th century term, two-person heterosexual relationships. In a study published in the Journal of Marriage and Family Therapy, Olivia Leaker and Al Carlozzi looked at expectations and responses to sexual and emotional infidelity among a group of 72 lesbian women, 114 heterosexual women, 53 gay men, and 57 heterosexual men. Women responded with stronger emotions to emotional and sexual infidelity than did men, with heterosexuals rating emotional and sexual infidelity as more emotionally distressing than lesbian and gay individuals. But this was not their only fascinating finding. They report the level of perceived power within one's relationship has been shown to influence the expression of jealousy. Namely, women who feel powerful and are less dependent on their partners tend to react similarly to men by acting on their anger and ending the relationship. Lesbian, gay, and bisexual individuals, LGBTQ, have been posited to be more susceptible to jealous feelings than heterosexuals, particularly when one or both partners keep the same-sex relationship hidden out of fear of discrimination. This can cause insecure feelings, which often increases one's risk of jealousy. I will do a separate episode devoted entirely to jealousy at some point in the future. To wrap up, let's talk about one more research result relating to cheating. What's the factor we're looking at here? Testosterone. In a study by Lane L. Ritchie and Sarah M. Van Anders in the journal Adaptive Human Behavior and Physiology, the authors discussed the steroid peptide theory of social bonds. This theory identifies two types of aggression, antagonistic and protective, and two types of intimacy, erotic and nurturant, that have different effects on testosterone and peptide. In their study, these researchers examined the effects of jealousy-provoking situations on testosterone. To do so, they presented participants with scenarios in which they imagined themselves in one of three situations involving their partner, two of which were intended to elicit jealousy, and one was a control, like a placebo. Just some random story. Some of these stories involved flirting, while others involved kissing. In women, results partially supported the researchers' first hypothesis, namely, that flirting would significantly increase testosterone in women compared to the neutral condition, the placebo story. Their results, however, did not support their second hypothesis, to wit, kissing did not increase testosterone more than flirting did. And moreover, even more surprisingly, it did not significantly increase testosterone at all relative to the neutral condition. Why did they come up with this possibly counterintuitive finding? They suggest that extradiatic flirting leads women to believe that a rival is threatening the relationship. Threats to relationships could be conceptualized as competitive. Competitive contexts have been empirically shown and theorized to increase testosterone. So what about kissing? I really like kissing myself. We'll talk about that more in the future. So what about kissing in terms of their research? Ritchie and Van Anders suggest that, quote, for a woman finding her partner kissing a man might be more akin to a defeat where a rival has already won. In such a case, the woman may respond as though they have lost a competition with a decrease in testosterone relative to the change in testosterone elicited by the challenge condition, i.e., the condition in which the woman is presented with her boyfriend or husband flirting, and thus the woman is still in competition, still a competitor, still in the game. Whoa! Interesting. One part of me is tempted to say at this point, ain't science grand? Well, another part of me is tempted to say something more cynical, ironic. Well, that's what a review of the literature consists of in this area, with a number of comments and interpretations by myself. All right, that's cheating. What sort of people cheat, what motivates them to cheat, and how do their partners respond to cheating? Among future topics are open relationships and polyamory, the relationship between sensuality and emotion. Can entering a relationship with someone entail becoming a minor character or a bad or blameworthy character in that person's personal soap opera? And most important and most exciting for me, an interview with author and psychotherapist Anita DiFrancesco. All coming up on Explore Ecstatic Sensuality. I would like to take a moment to say something about the person who inspired this podcast and to highly recommend the books she's written and also her professional services. Her name is Anita DiFrancesco. She is a psychotherapist. She is a very experienced and professional relationship counselor. She has two wonderful podcasts, It's Your Voice, ! And that continues on with a new podcast called Discover Joyous Love, on which I've also been a guest. It was a wonderful experience, as it always is, communicating with Anita. So check out her podcast. Her books are extraordinary. One is called Live Free, Recreate and Liberate Your Life. The best book title I could possibly think of, a classic title for a book, in which she really takes you through things you can do to make major changes in elevating your self-love, self-esteem, happiness, and even to help you sexually, to find a greater sexual fulfillment and vitality. And her other book, different but also relevant, is a true crime thriller, the Donna Gentili story, which concerns the brutal murder of her first cousin, Donna Gentili, and her, that is Anita's, personal efforts to identify the killer. Two great books available on Amazon, or check out Anita's own website, tantrawisdom.com. You can find her there, and also on her Facebook pages, which are Love and Relationship Coach, and also her business page, Tantra Wisdom. Thanks for checking her out. You won't be disappointed.